Marc Mezvinsky, Chelsea's husband to face military tribunal, died. It was felt that Marc Mezvinsky, husband to the late Chelsea Clinton, had struck an immunity from prosecution deal with the Office of Military Commissions and the Judge Advocate General's Corps. But Rear ADM Darcy Crandall announced on Tuesday that Mezvinsky, whose testimony helped convict Clinton, will indeed be prosecuted as a co-conspirator to Chelsea's crimes. A JAG source speaking under promise of anonymity told RRN that Rear Admiral Crandall revoked Mezvinsky's immunity plea after learning that he had marginalized his role in Hillary and Chelsea's child trafficking ring at Clinton's tribunal. Mezvinsky had painted himself a victim, claiming the Clintons had made him an indentured servant in exchange for allowing Chelsea to be his bride. Mezvinsky testified under oath that the scope of his crime was destroying records linking the Clintons to the sale of underage boys and girls. He had told the Office of Military Commissions that his underlying amorous affection for Chelsea led him down a deep dark path of self-regrets. Although JAG and the ONC had not previously disclosed Mezvinsky's fate, RN heard through sources that Mezvinsky would be released from custody for having testified against Chelsea, presumably to care for his own children. Odd, since he helped destroy the lives of so many others. On Tuesday, November 16, Rear Admiral Crandall said new evidence will clearly illustrate that Mezvinsky did far more than burning, shred and digitally cleanse evidence of the Clintons' crimes. RN has not been made aware of what that evidence might be, but it must be damning because Rear ADM Crandall will ask the tribunal to consider capital punishment. The investigation into Clinton crimes didn't end with Hillary's death. Not with Chelsea's either. It's been ongoing. There's been an ongoing effort to identify kids whom the Clintons victimized, establishing their identities and getting testimony from ones that escaped fates worse than death. All I can say right now is Mezvinsky minimalized his involvement. The rest will come out at trial. Our source said Mezvinsky, he added, has been detained at Guantanamo Bay ever since his apprehension. Unlike other Gitmo guests, Mezvinsky has avoided Camp Delta and instead being housed in barracks modernized to appear like a contemporary apartment. That will now change now that he's indicted and not a witness. On Monday he'll be moved to Delta to await his tribunal, which will begin after Thanksgiving weekend. He's been a right since Chelsea got hanged. Our source said. Mezvinsky has reportedly lamented his wife's death, sounding indefatigably over his lost love. Seems like he really loved her. Still does. It's tragic misplaced love pushed him to a criminal life and how he must pay the price. Defense Minister Alexei Reznikov in a meeting at the Pentagon this afternoon around 1 p.m. ET. In case you're curious. We're not sure exactly what Mr. Putin is up to. The second deaf Hostin told reporters Wednesday at the Pentagon when asked about Russian equipment apparently left in place some 160 miles from Ukraine's northern border near Yuma. The Associated Press has a tiny bit more from that exchange in Washington here. Not an icy, YMI. Ukraine's president signed a naval agreement with the UK on Tuesday. The British Ministry of Defence announced in a statement, "We are concerned by Russia's military build-up and activity around the borders of Ukraine." The mob said after that meeting in Kiev and noted our governments have no desire to be adversarial or seek in any way to strategically encircle or undermine the Russian Federation. You may remember the last time UK and Ukrainian defence officials met back in June. The Royal Navy's HMS Defender and the Royal Netherlands Navy's HNLMS Everson had both pulled into porting Ukraine's Odessa, but an unknown entity seemed to have spoofed their maritime tracking signals, which suggested the ships were next to Ukraine. Sevastopol Naval Base, a base that's been illegally occupied by Russia since its invasion in 2014. US Naval Institute News recounted the dodgy event. POTUS 46's National Security Advisor ran up his Russian counterpart on Wednesday, the White House announced in a brief readout afterward. The two men spoke in a frank and constructive manner and discussed several issues in the bilateral agenda and regional and global matters of concern. Homeland Security officials say Virginia's Fort Lee has resettled all of its Afghan evacuees, which numbered around 2,500 according to the Defense Department, and overall more than 25,000 Afghan evacuees have been resettled in communities across our country. DHS said in a statement Wednesday about 45,000 Afghans await resettlement at 7 other military posts, including Indiana's Camp Atterbury, New Jersey's Joint Base, McGuire-Dix Lakehurst, Holloman Air Force Base in New Mexico, Fort Bliss in Texas, Fort Pickett, which like its Confederate name Safely, is also in Virginia, Marine Corps Base Quantico, about 40 miles south of Deep Sea. And at Wisconsin's Fort McCoy. Don't I see YMI? Here is a glimpse of the screening process for Afghan evacuees shared by the Defense Department's Inspector General Wednesday and flagged on Twitter by Jeff Selden from Voice of America. President Joe Biden welcomes the Mexican and Canadian President and Prime Minister at the White House today for a North American Leaders Summit, the first since 2016, before opponents 45 abandoned the tradition which began under POTUS 43 in 2005. Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau drops by 1,600 PNV just after 1 p.m. Eastern Time, followed by Mexico's Andrés Manuel López Obrador at 3 p.m. and the three amigos then meet together in the East Room at about 5 p.m. leading Biden's public agenda, stimulating competitiveness and equitable growth between the three countries, climate change and plans to develop some sort of regional vision for migration. According to the White House. This week, we learned nearly all of America's allies have experienced democratic backsliding since 2010 and at rates far outpacing average declines among other countries. According to Max Fisher of the New York Times, reporting Tuesday after reviewing reams of new data from democracy watchers at the Swedish nonprofit DEM, one big event that shifted the post-Soviet democratic trajectories of the 1990s. Beginning in 2001. On top of this, Fisher writes, awareness of the United States' domestic problems, polarization, racial injustice has greatly affected global perceptions of you as democracy abroad. As researchers that you have documented well here, for example, why it matters, emphasis added, it would seem to suggest that much of the world's backsliding is not imposed on democracies by foreign powers, but rather as a rut rising within the world's most powerful network of mostly democratic alliances, according to Fisher. And lastly, Taiwan's military blasted dance music base White as it unveiled its first squadron of upgraded F-16V fighter jets at the Chilean Air Force Base on Thursday. Context at a cost of about $4 billion. Taiwan has been converting 141 F-16AB jets into the F-16V Type, 64 of which have already been upgraded, and has additionally ordered 66 new F-16 Versas which have new avionics, weapons and radar systems to better face down the Chinese Air Force. Reuters reports from Kiani Taiwan could soon have the largest F-16 fleet in Asia at more than 200 thanks to an $8 billion deal with the U.S. from 2019. A bit more from Reuters. 0.1 Last thing, for 19 consecutive days, China has sent aircraft into Taiwan's A.D.I.Z. or Air Defense Identification Zone. According to Taipei's defense ministry on Wednesday, fighter jets made the trip today. It was early warning and electronic warfare aircraft. For what it's worth, November 6 was the last time double-digit numbers of Chinese aircraft reportedly entered Taiwan's. But there's so far been nothing like the waves of aircraft that swarmed the island's edges back in early October, drawing international attention. Data as Pentagon fails forth on it, officials have no doubt it will eventually pass the Inspector General and independent public accounting firms conducted this year's audit of $2 trillion in assets and $3 trillion in liabilities. For the fourth year in a row, the Defense Department failed its annual financial audit but demonstrated it's making progress. On Monday, the Defense Department completed its annual audit required by the 1990 Chief Financial Officers Act for the fourth time. The department's Inspector General and independent public accounting firms conducted the fiscal 2021 audit, which covered the department's more than $2 trillion in assets and $3 trillion in liabilities. About 1,200 auditors did 278 in-person and 1,069 virtual site visits. Although we do not yet have a clean opinion and we have a long way to go, I will note that over this past decade we have done what we have told the Congress we would do when we said we would do it, said Michael McCord, Undersecretary of Defense, Controller and Chief Financial Officer, on a briefing call with reporters. We believe we've made steady progress in unmodified opinions, achieved or expected to be achieved from several of our standalone audits that cover approximately 37% of our total assets. However, McCord said, as expected, the overall department got a disclaimer of opinion on our consolidated financial statement, which means the auditor has no opinion on the financial statements. This could be for a variety of reasons. The Defense Department's annual financial report for fiscal 2021 released early on Tuesday contains information on the audit. Among other things, of the 26 standalone audits, 6 reporting entities received unmodified opinions. 8 auditors determined the financial statements were presented fairly and in accordance with generally accepted accounting principles. 1 reporting entity received a qualified opinion. 8 auditors concluded there were misstatements or potentially undetected misstatements that were material but not pervasive to the financial statements. And 17 reporting entities received disclaimers of opinion, said the report. The standalone audits for two reporting entities, the DoD Inspector General's Office and the Defense Information Systems Agency Working Capital Fund, are scheduled to conclude in December 2021. GOT auditors also use material weaknesses, which are deficiencies in internal controls, and notices of findings and recommendations to measure progress, which the Defense Department continues to monitor, said the report last year. Thomas Harker, then Navy top budget official who was also performing the duties of Defense Department Comptroller, said he didn't expect the Pentagon to achieve a clean audit until 2027. On the call with reporters on Monday, McCord neither firmly agreed nor disagreed with that timeline projection. He said in a statement that he has no doubt that we will reach our goal of achieving an unmodified audit opinion. He also lauded his organization for its roles supporting other department-wide high-visibility fiscal 2021 objectives, including transitioning administrations and withdrawing our troops and Afghan allies from Afghanistan. The Defense Department has an annual expenditure of about $800 billion. So the approximately $207 million cost of the audit, which represents 0.3% of expenditures for the year, is a highly positive investment in transparency, accountability and efficiency for the American people, said a fact sheet from the department. I was glad to see that area is critical to supporting our men and women in uniform, such as civilian paint, military paid and the Military Retirement Fund, pass their audits. But the fact remains that we have much work to do, said Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin III in a statement. Make no mistake, none of us at the department are content with the overall results of this audit. But we are committed to learning from it and to doing better. We must work harder to institute stronger internal controls and prove in every way that we are being good stewards of taxpayer dollars. GOT. The financial watchdog group, Truth in Accounting, has issued reports on the past three audits GOT following their most recent analysis published in March. Bill Bergman, Truth in Accounting, is director of research, told Government Executive they are making progress in the sense that they're finding more problems than they resolve. Then in May, a group of senators introduced bipartisan legislation that would require the Pentagon to pass a full independent audit by fiscal 2022. Any department component that failed to do so would have to return 1% of its budget to the Treasury Department to help with deficit reduction. Lawmakers in the House introduced a similar version in July. Neither bill has been voted on. Similar